Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Friday. Happy Friday, August 24th, 2018, 8 a.m. Your first daily dose of happy for the day. And we're off to a beautiful weather start today. We had actually cool weather last night in August, which is actually what's supposed to happen in August, believe it or not. But
yeah, right.
But it is supposed to get cooler. But it got cooler. It was like in the mid-50s, and that's close to where it's supposed to be. And I like that because, and our team likes that for the gardening service, because that means the humidity is down. And when it gets down that cold, the humidity goes away. So, good things happening from that perspective, I can tell you. How you doing, Tom? I mean, I haven't talked to you since Monday, but how's it going?
I'm doing good. We're having a little bit of cooling off here too, where the highs aren't quite hitting 90. They're like, the hottest days lately are getting up around 87, 88, but we've even had some days in the 70s. It's been really nice, and that's unusual, but it's actually normal for August. Fall's coming around, like you say, and so things have been very interesting for me. Just a lot of changes, and yet I feel like I'm settling into more and more feeling I'm in my heart and feeling that things are unfolding the way they need to unfold in my life. And
well, that's a good thing, especially considering what we were talking about on Monday. I mean, that means you made some important changes that made a difference in your life. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I don't even remember exactly what I was going through on Monday, but I'm sure it was significant. But I just feel like it's just a natural progression of allowing and trusting, that life is going to always default eventually to what's really naturally meant to be, and the flow of beauty, the flow of love, the flow of possibility. That's what really is ultimately behind everything that we struggle with. So
absolutely, yeah. And
feeling that more.
We won't rehash what happened on Monday, because that would regress. We don't want to do that. But the fact that you'd forgotten about it, I think that's probably the best thing that happened. You forgot entirely what it was. Good.
Yeah, that's right. I just know that it was something about the heart and about becoming more and more conscious and aware, and so everything's good.
Excellent. Well, then that, I guess, is probably our foundation for today's topic, because since everything has been about being in the heart lately, manifesting your unique gifts, well, your unique gifts come from within you, which I guess, first place we look for that is coming from within the heart, isn't it?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it comes out of that knowing that everything is okay, and that the universe is actually a benevolent and benign place. It doesn't always seem that way, does it?
No, especially for us this week, because Louise and I have been dealing with stuff with a business, which I won't go into great detail about. But the bottom line is that we're having to step up our game, do more. And as I was thinking about that this morning, I was telling you before the podcast, that's really the diametric opposite of what we talk about here on the podcast. We talk about getting into the good feeling place and asking the universe to do more. And here we are stepping up physically doing more. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, hold on. There's something not right with this picture. So we got to kind of turn that one around. But yeah.
Especially if it feels stressful, right? Or if it feels difficult.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
How do we learn to let the universe do it at those times when things seem the most difficult?
And I mean,
like when you're in our shoulders.
Exactly. And when you're in the middle of it, it's difficult to let go, because a lot of the stuff you can't let go of at that moment in time. If you did, some really important stuff would fall apart. Yeah. But what you're aiming for is a longer term picture where you're letting go, and the universe is coming in, filling in the gaps and doing what it does so well. That's really what we're trying to do. I mean, if I could just drop the reins today and just let everything, fall apart, and the boat would turn in the stream, it would head downstream, but we'd go through some rapids sideways, and I don't really want to go through rapids sideways.
Yeah, there's that.
I really don't enjoy that part, so I want to make it a controlled turn.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's I've been there too, and I don't know. At those times, it just seems like you got to do what you got to do, and it's the momentum thing, maybe, that you just got to get through, because the momentum is carrying you. It's like being on the river. I guess it is like being in a rapid, and you look at it and you say, well, I could capsize here. So how do I aim this boat in such a way? And sometimes I know when I've been on a river doing a trip down a river that has a lot of rapids, you sometimes have to row like crazy for a certain period of time. That I was in the raft with this one guy for a 10-day trip on a river that had a lot of rapids up in Idaho. And you had to really, at certain points, pull, and he'd be yelling at me, because we were going to slam into a wall and capsize, and
right.
Some big giant rock. You had to get your boat to the right position, like all of a sudden you realize we're on the right and we got to be way over on the left and it's 50 feet over there. So you start rowing like crazy. But once you get over there, then you're in the right place in the stream and it carries you exactly where you need to go.
Maybe that should be the topic of a show sometime. You have to avoid the rocks so you can get into the mainstream.
When you're on a river trip, what you become is a rock reader in a way. Yeah, you do, and you're just always looking for where is it too shallow, where are the rocks, where is they likely going to grab the bottom of your raft if you're in a raft, or if you're in a canoe, it's even more tricky in a way because your canoe can't mush over things. It's
right.
Really around things,
right?
And it's quite a beautiful experience because you get really good. Same as mountain biking, when you're coming down a really steep path, and it's full of rocks and drop offs and things. You gotta look well ahead on your path, especially if you're going very fast, so that as each of those things come up, you can negotiate just right around it, and you get really good at that.
I found the best way to handle mountain biking is not to do it at all, because for me, mountain biking is like a controlled form of suicide, and I really wasn't interested in engaging in it.
Yeah. Well, you're really tall too, and you have to get so far back on your bike, with your butt sticking way out there when you're tall, because your weight has to be just perfectly distributed over that bike as you go over intense things. Otherwise, you can flip off it.
Yeah, and it's not a pretty thing to have a 6'8" person flipping.
Oh,
you don't go to the circus to watch that.
No, that's incredible. Yeah, that's a lot of height.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you've been there, done that.
Well, actually, I refuse to do that one in particular, but
no,
yes.
You've done the height thing.
The height thing I've done for a while.
You've done the height thing for a while.
Just a little while, yeah.
So what's your unique gift to do in the world? I know it's this podcast.
Yeah, well, that pretty much answers that question. Thank you. I appreciate it.
just to make your end of the show simple.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I've ever really figured out what my purpose in life is. I did try to figure that out early on, but I kind of gave up after a while trying to figure that out, because I realized even if I knew the answer to that, what would it tell me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my purpose is X. So what? I should be doing X all my life? Even podcasts I don't want to do all the time.
No.
And in fact, I think,
from one thing to another.
If there's one thing I learned from my father worked for one company, General Electric, for 44 years. Now, he did do a number of different jobs in that company. I think he did 4 different kinds of careers while he was there. But, 44 years basically doing one thing, working for one company. That was it. That was his life. And while we appreciated the fact that he was a great provider and so forth, on the other hand, what did that do for his life? I mean, I was glad he had other activities outside of work. That was a good thing. But it's one thing to find what your purpose in life is, but it's another thing to find what the other purposes are. You can't just do one thing. Otherwise, you'll go nuts in most cases, unless you're Thomas Edison, who just likes putting filaments in light bulbs. But
well, he loved inventing, and I suppose he invented other things too.
He did. And he was quite prolific, actually. Invented a huge number of things. Yeah. And had some fairly famous employees, including Nikola Tesla, which is just, I mean, can you imagine being, you're Thomas Edison and you hire Tesla? What a hire that is.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So some people do definitely follow things that they feel are uniquely theirs to do. And that's what this podcast, the idea of it was, that I've been looking at that ever since I was in my 30s, mainly. I think in my 20s, I did what I was uniquely here to do, which was wonderful, because I was a director for a nonprofit organization. And by going around from community to community all around the country, I was working with people in a way that was really ideally suited for me. And when I look back into my childhood, I realized, well, that was what I did as a kid. I organized games in the neighborhood and circuses and dances.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I always liked to do that kind of stuff. And
wow.
It wasn't all I did, but, I was constantly organizing games, like kickball. And I even made up games and then invited all the kids in the neighborhood to come and play the different games.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, I was like this little ringleader, and I guess that's why I created a circus. Eventually, that was one of my crowning glories of my childhood, was when I created this neighborhood circus. And then when I got into my 20s, I was asked to coordinate. Well, I was asked if I wanted to coordinate things. Went to a big festival, and they were saying, who wants to make all the roads in the parking lots? And I was 23 years old, and I said, I will. And so that pretty soon I had a team of 14 people and was making, all the roads and parking lots for this big festival out in Montrose, Colorado. And it was fun, but I really learned after that. Somebody asked me, would you, come to New York and help us coordinate a clinic? And then would you go to Rhode Island and help us coordinate another clinic? And then up to Magnolia, Massachusetts to create another one. And then would you come to Boston and help us run the Boston community? And
wow.
But the thing was, it was just all natural. I never wanted particularly to do that. I would just ask, and I kept doing it, and it kept feeling good. And I kept just responding to the fact that people thought I was good at it. And so I kept doing it. But after that all ended in the early 80s, after 10 years of doing that, ever since then, in a sense, I've never known who I am or what I'm here to do, but I did, land on the idea that I wanted to sort of be a psychotherapist or some kind of a coach back when I was about in my 30s. And I've been still evolving towards that. And now I'm going to turn 70 this year.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a journey of, watching myself. Well, I created, a family in the meantime, and that became my coaching opportunity was
sure.
family.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that. I didn't do what I considered my life's work for about 30 years. And
now, how did that impact you? I mean, was that a good thing? Was that a bad thing? Or did you feel like you missed something?
Except doing the family during that time. So that was, I guess, where I put that energy went into the family, because I only worked 100 days a year, and I had the rest of the time off to take care of the family. And there was a lot of work to do in that family, because the children were pretty impacted by their previous situation, their previous family. And I came along as a stepdad. But so I had that service aspect of my life, but it did impact me, because I'd go out and do this other job and always felt like, what am I doing this for? I'm doing this because it pays all the bills, and it was really a good income. But it also had some qualities in it that I loved. I did get to interact with people all day long, and that's something that I really love. And a lot of people, because I would visit professors on campuses all over, different states in the West, and by going, office to office to office all day long, I had a lot of fun talking with all these professors and all these different disciplines. I learned a lot, and it was great. But this, asking myself all the time, really, I was doing exercises and reading books like, what do I want to be when I grow up? In the meantime, I was already growing up and getting a lot older. But I'm still, in a way, asking that question today, because what I'm asking is, what is it to be the most enthusiastic about my life expression, like of who I am and what I'm offering in the world? I don't think it's ever a mistake that we're doing what we're doing, whatever it is. It's all part of the journey. And it's all, I think every day we still, even if we're under pressure, like you're feeling right now, it's like, do you still have the opportunity every day to find some quality in it that is uplifting, that is magical, you might say, or is otherwise, redeeming, and helps you see that your unique gifts, excuse me, sorry, your unique gifts as a teacher, as a leader, as an example, however you feel you show up each day it matters, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it matters a lot. And I can say that for most of my life, I really didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do anyway. Most of the time, it was kind of along the lines you were talking about. I did stuff because I had to, because I needed to have money coming in. But I really wasn't doing anything that I loved. The podcast is really the first thing that's come along that I really, really love doing. Even though I'm not getting paid for it, I still love doing it. And I'd love to get paid for it. That'd be great. But it really illustrates for me how important it is to find that one thing that you really love. Doesn't even matter whether you're getting paid for it. Just finding it and doing it. And it doesn't have to be your life. It doesn't have to be even the majority thing in your life. But finding it is where, I mean, you talked about how you deal with stress, how you deal with, when the pressure is climbing. And you pointed out very accurately that my go-to thing is the podcast. And it is. It's not my only method. It's not my only process for, getting myself into a better headspace, getting myself into a better feeling place. But it's an important one. And I am so appreciative that I found that. Now, is that the same thing as bringing money in? No, but it's pretty darn valuable. Because the simple fact is, unless we get ourselves into that good health headspace, unless we get ourselves into that good feeling space, we're not leveraging the universe the way we can. So it almost doesn't matter whether or not it's directly bringing income in. What matters is it getting me into the place I need to be in so I can attract the stuff that I want? That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I've always felt a kind of a dilemma around the money side of it. I have created a career that does bring me the income from doing the thing that I feel is a unique gift that I have, which is working with people in this one-on-one and small groups, to help people get turned on to how beautiful their life could be and how much they could manifest their gifts. In a lot of ways, that's the biggest calling I feel, is to ask those questions with people and ask those questions with myself, because I've spent so long in a way asking that and refining my life constantly to the point of is this what I really want to be doing? Is this what I really want to be doing? And I don't think I've succeeded at all compared to what some people have who, maybe figured out how to be in that place in their early years and have managed to do a lot of manifesting what's uniquely theirs to do in the world. I guess it can be frustrating it's been frustrating for me in a way to know that I have these unique things about me, but that they're half of the time I wasn't sure what they are. So I was always, studying more, learning more, following more threads into what is it that turns me on. But I could look at all the books in my library any given time and go, okay, this kind of sums up the 7 or 8 areas that I'm interested in.
Right.
But it was always like 7 or 8 areas. And then I was always going, how could I synthesize this into one thing? And that's been the frustrating part for me.
But you have found stuff. That's the main thing. I mean, it's not like you haven't found anything. You found stuff that was enjoyable. That was, it made you want to get up and do stuff.
Oh yeah. It's always been fun to follow the threads of how I could show up in the world and manifest some of them. I just always felt like, wait a minute, when am I going to just step out on the quote, the world stage and as who I really want to be, as some people do, whether they become a musician or they become a corporate executive or they become an artist, whatever they end up doing, become a mother. They do the thing that really pulls them the strongest. And I think that's a lot what I'm bringing up in this podcast, curious about is, do you feel something in you that's calling you in a certain direction? Have you been shown something in your life that you have a gift for? Like when I talk with you on this podcast, it's clear to me you have a gift for being in brilliant conversations and guiding the conversation in exciting and interesting and fun ways that are uplifting and illuminating to other people. Now that's an amazing gift. I know that I can trust you when we get on a podcast that you're going to negotiate and guide that podcast in a direction that'll feel good. And
well, thank you. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah. I mean, it's nice to know that I'm having that effect. I can't say I'm doing something specific. Oh, yes, I'm going to do something to make sure I guide this podcast properly. No, that never enters my head. But I'm glad it works out that way. So that I think
exactly.
I think that's what happens when you do something you love, right? It just kind of naturally happens.
I think that's one of the keys to what is our gifts is that, like I found myself doing it as a kid. And then when I did it through my 20s and early 30s, I never had to think about, being a good community coordinator, a good director, a good facilitator. It just was what I did.
Right.
And
right.
I didn't know why, but one time somebody said, you're one of the best coordinators we have in the country for going to a community that's troubled and helping it get all straightened out, the way the organization wanted that community to run, which was, based on a lot of fun and good feelings. And they said, somebody asked me once, how do you do it? And I said, I just show up. I just show up and be me. I don't do anything, because I didn't. And I would just show up and be me. I would usually appoint somebody as an assistant right away because I always felt I needed a good assistant. And then the two of us would figure it out. And so it just became fun. I mean, it was just like playing. It really was. It was like being back in my childhood, playing games. And it's funny that I got away from that for so many years, like how to just go have fun with a bunch of people. and out of that, something would just emerge that was cool.
That is kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? Because when we're having the most fun is the time when we're in in one sense, it's more productive. We're doing more in a sense when we're having fun, which is kind of flipping the traditional approach on its ear, because traditionally we say, well, you got to work hard to what you want to accomplish and so forth. And yet what we're saying here is you got to find what you love and you'll end up working hard on it because you love it. Not quite the same concept at all. And it has quite a different way of playing out too, because it's a lot less pressure packed. It's a lot less stressful, and it's a lot more, fun. That's why we do the fun, right?
Yeah. And it's in the moment because we are, we're receiving impulses. Like, if you're having fun, if I'm having fun and I'm actually following what feels good to me, then I'm much more likely going to be receiving impulse after impulse after impulse of what's more fun and what's more fun and what's more fun, and or what needs to be done, and I'll go do that. I remember back when I was running that organization, and if I had to go out and find a new house to move this community to, because I was running ashrams, they were called, spiritual centers in big cities around the country, and a lot of times I had to go out and find a house for everybody to live in, and that seemed like a task, because after you do that for 2 or 3 weeks, you're driving the streets, you're looking in the paper. Back then we didn't have the internet, so you're looking in the newspaper all the time, and then you're going out and looking at these places. And I remember sometimes where that was the most difficult thing I ever did, because it was an onerous, painstaking task, and yet I just sort of took it all in stride. Like, I actually had fun doing it, really. I mean, part of me was like, well, it's kind of cool to go look at all these different houses and then to watch how it would unfold. Life would show me, Source would show me the right house. And when I would find it, it was really cool because I know this is the place, this is the place we're going to take. And it just was like a divine thing in the fact that it was the right owner, the right price, everything was falling into place. It was a beautiful house. And then when we'd move into it, it would feel fantastic. And we would always get along with the owner really well.
Good. That's a good thing.
So things like that. I mean, when we're following our natural flow, things do unfold for us, I believe.
So if we look at the title of our topic, Manifesting Your Unique Gifts, I mean, manifesting, we're used to talking about that from an LOA perspective, ask, believe, receive, that sort of thing. But manifesting unique gifts, so what do you think? Is it the same process? Do you actively ask the universe, what are my unique gifts? Please deliver them to me.
Well, I didn't in my early 20s, and those 10 years I worked for that organization. I don't think I really asked what were my gifts. I guess I kind of did, because the organization would ask you to think about what you do, what you feel most called to do. And I did follow what I felt most called to do, but it was others that asked me to do it. it wasn't that I said I want to be a coordinator. It was, well, I did at that festival that very first time. I was at, they said we need somebody to organize the roads and parking lots. I don't know why my hand shot up. I mean, it was like, oh, okay. But it felt like, oh, I could do that. Surely it'll just all happen. And it did. I just sort of believed it would just all happen. I don't know why I believed that, but maybe because I went back to my childhood when I would organize other things and it just would always be fun. Therefore, I kind of knew, well, fun happens or something. I don't know. Okay. And, but yeah, so I think though, in the years following that, I started to really ask, and I asked so intensely that I was constantly asking. And I think I got stuck in asking instead of receiving.
Why is that?
I guess I didn't, for some reason at that point, I no longer trusted that I could, I felt like I was on my own. Before I was with this teacher from India and I trusted, I think that everything was sort of under this divine guidance of this somehow. Being with this teacher meant that I was divinely guided because I felt he was a true master. He and that's how he showed up as a master, and he had gifts. He had gifts to give me, and he gave me his gift of showing me how to go inside and connect to my heart, connect to meditation. And I would do that twice a day, every day, and I felt I was divinely guided. But when I got out of his organization and was out on the streets again, so to speak, then I felt like it was up to me. And when I felt it was up to me, I took it real seriously, like you did going to college. And, it's like, you better pick your major. And all of a sudden I equated it with the difficulty of being in the world and having to live up to some standard, some worldly standard instead of a standard of fun or a standard of divine guidance, a standard of play. I no longer felt that divinely guided.
What do you think changed? I mean, why is it you had it at one point and then all of a sudden you didn't have it?
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing I've always equated that with, and which I've even in the recent years equated it with, is that I went back into this place that I feel the larger society seems to dictate, which is that there's no free lunch, that if you want something, you have to pay a price. If you want something, you have to work hard to get it. So those kind of messages, I think, were very internalized in me in school and by my parents, which was, you got to work. You got to work hard. And you're lucky if you get the A's and the B's. You only get the A's and the B's if you put in long hours and you try really, really hard. Excuse me.
Yeah. And that is a trap, isn't it? Believing that that's the only way to get there.
I think it's such a huge trap that I personally believe the dominant bulk of the people in the Western world are controlled by that. And it's why in a way, we aim low. I think a lot of us aim low as to what we could do with our lives because there's a huge message that says you're not going to get that easily. If you want to be a doctor, you're going to pay a huge price. Now, okay, you should. You don't want somebody in the emergency room who doesn't know what they're doing, or surgery, who doesn't know what they're doing.
Right.
So there is definite reasons to learn your skill and your trade and your craft or your art, get really good at it. But the fact that we believe that it has to be a big price paid and that for some reason then it's hard and it's onerous and it's difficult and you have to suffer to get there, that's the part that I think is the big illusion, because yes, you might have to do an apprenticeship, but do you want to follow a thread that isn't fun? I guess that's what it comes down to. It gets all mixed up. We lose the idea of what fun is, don't we? In the process of thinking that it's hard work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that definitely happens. And what I learned from my time of not doing something that I loved, because my career was technology related, and still is to some extent. I worked in a lot of areas of IT before it was even called IT. It was just called computers at one point. But what I learned from doing that, I mean, it was something I was good at, It was not something I loved. And I learned that I could continue to do it, and I could do it well, and I could work long hours and often make good money doing it. But even with all of that, there was no satisfaction. And the lack of satisfaction catches up to you over time. You don't notice it at first. At first you say, oh, that's no big deal. Yeah, and it is no big deal at first, you know. But you go without the satisfaction, without the joy long enough, and it wears you out. Until it finally gets to the point where you can hardly even lift your head. You're so tired of it. You're so frustrated by the fact that you're just not enjoying the work that you're spending most of your time on.
Yeah.
And that to me is that's like the that's the hidden detriment to not doing something that you love. It's one that you don't see and you don't experience right away. It takes a while for it to show up, especially if it's something you're good at.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times our soul, I feel like I lose touch with my soul's calling, so to speak. If I dull myself into a routine job year after year after year, or any kind of a routine pattern, like I've been in a pattern for years that I've been breaking out of over the last 4 or 5 years, mainly because of law of attraction and understanding that there is such a thing as really trusting source to orchestrate my life, and that I could let go of this idea that it's all on my shoulders. But yeah, I've lived so much of my time feeling just trapped by the belief that I want to do what I love, but it's too hard. Or I want to do what I love, but I don't know how to get there. And in the meantime, you need to make money, you need to take care of business on all kinds of levels. And I think people wake up sometimes in their 60s and 70s realizing that, they've never done what they want to in their life, or they've never followed that calling. And now they've got this big bucket list, all the things they want to do, but it's no longer possible to live maybe an entire lifestyle of, that can begin at these later ages, but.
Well, you can. That's it. But I think there's also the question of what if you're not in your later years? What if you're in your early years? What if you're in your 20s and 30s and you're hearing this podcast and you're saying, geez, maybe I really should start looking for something that I love. How do you attract it?
Well, I think it is good to ask yourself what it is that you really love. I think that's a really good question to say, what do I naturally gravitate towards? What did I gravitate towards as a kid? That often is a great clue. What the things you really loved when you were younger, and then what are you feeling right now? That if money wasn't an object, that's a good question to ask. I think if money wasn't an object at all, and okay, now you could, or your health, or anything that you feel stands between you and doing what you love, your current job, if that wasn't an object, what would you be doing with today? What would you be doing tomorrow? Like what would you set yourself up to do? What would you think would be really the most fun? If you right now could take off the entire rest of this day and do nothing but things you loved, and then you knew that someone was going to offer you so much money that you're going to now have a year minimum they're just saying, okay, let's take a year at a time. What's this first year? What do you want to do with all your time for an entire year?
Yeah, well, I think it's a good question to ask, because I think that was the question that I originally asked myself when I first started exploring the law of attraction as a way to do exactly what we're talking about, find the thing that we love. So I love that question. That question made a difference in my life. And it's not an easy question to answer at first. I mean, when you first ask yourself that question, you get this great big silence.
Yeah, or you just think of some things that are relief from your current situation. Well, I would just go to where there's a spa and a cabin in the mountains, and I would every day I'd go for a hike. I'd go to the spa,
which is a good way to start.
It's a good way to start because you get there to your cabin, and of course you can do this mentally. You can imagine yourself now you're at your cabin. what other things do you want to do? Well, I would really like to start finally learning to play the flute. I've wanted to play the flute or whatever you think of. I'd really like to read about quantum physics. I've always wanted to read or whatever. I want to read, these novels by this incredible author I love so much, or I want to watch, all these different documentaries on this topic, or I want to really get into growing, some kind of thing I would love to grow. I want to have a garden, whatever it is. I want to paint. I want to draw. I want to make sculptures. Often it is something creative, because I think it's really natural in our makeup as human beings to want to use our hands and to want to be engaged in something that enables us to see beauty emerge. I mean, for a lot of people, that's what it is. For me, it was my interactions with people. It wasn't so much to make some product, although music, I do love to create music. I do love to sing and play guitar. I love to play tons of instruments. And if I had my life to live over right now, I would do nothing. I mean, one of my hugest things I would do is just create all different ways to make music and to provide that to other people and to become proficient on more than one instrument, especially voice and other things. But and I still do that stuff, and I still want to do more and more of it. And so I think we each come in each lifetime, assuming we have many lifetimes, to take it up a notch in a way to manifest something more of who we really are as a soul, as an entity, as a being. That's a journey we're on, I think, through lifetimes.
How do you answer the question of, well, I need to be able to earn a living. How can I earn a living at the thing when I can't see a way to earn a living at the thing that I like?
Mm-hmm. I think that there's always going to be a way if we are open and receptive to what impulses we get from source, that it's our belief that that's the difficult part, that of course, by law of attraction, the thing that we think is hard is going to be hard. The thing that we fear is going to show up as a fear. And so somehow we have to know that the money's going to come, and we're going to do what we love, and the money's going to come. And in the meantime, if we have to take another job, I've heard, for example, Abraham talk about that many times, like someone's in the chair asking them questions of that very question, and they say, well, sometimes you do what's in front of you. You're not going to go put yourself in a position of being destitute or out on the street and then expect your money to just flow in. You better keep enough money to keep paying the bills and stay in your apartment or wherever you are, and be able to make the car payment and the insurance payment and all that. But in the meantime, continue to work towards, move towards that thing that you really do have a passion for, the thing that really turns you on, the thing that feels really good. How can you continue to work and move toward it at the same time and make that work out? But I think it takes a great trust that the universe wants us, life wants us to do the thing that feels good to us. And those conditions will evolve. If we truly believe that that's true, and we trust and let go to the fact that can happen, it can definitely happen.
Mm-hmm. And it can happen. There's no doubt about that.
I'm still in the mode because I'm still creating that in my life as a life coach, and it is happening, and I am making money from clients. It's just sometimes not enough. And so I'm looking at other things I can do as a life coach that can open up my horizon to even more, which is why I'm creating a group coaching program, which then, could make money as another income stream. And, I could add other things. I could add a book. I could add other products, videos, different things that I could offer that could be other income streams. But I want my focus to be on what really turns me on, what feels like fun, what feels good to me, and what opens up my new horizons, the new vistas, the new perspectives that I want to work on to open up my possibilities, to have more fun, to feel better, to maybe serve more people, to do more of what I love.
That is important. It's a vitally important thing. I mean, you mentioned how it is easy to pick up on something that you like doing if you're willing to put aside for the moment. I have to immediately make income. If you're willing to trust, the income will eventually come. And yet I'm sure there are many people, myself included, who have experienced, how long is this going to wait? How long am I going to have to wait for this? And we end up keeping score. Well, it hasn't shown up yet. I keep looking and it isn't there. In fact, I find myself keeping score with, because I would love to earn my living off of doing the podcast, right? Well, I've been watching the numbers, and the numbers have been going up. The number of unique listeners, people who are subscribers, the number of times they play different episodes and so forth, the numbers are up. This month alone, we may even make 10,000 plays in 1 month, which would be far and away a record for us. So everything keeps improving in that way. And I think that kind of looking at stuff, when you're looking at stuff that improves, that's a good thing. Because now you're looking at stuff from that positive, good feeling perspective. The difficulty, I think, comes in when we look at it from the lack perspective, the one that, it's not happening. When's it going to happen? I'm getting so frustrated that it hasn't happened. When's it going to happen? Why isn't it happening? That's a nowhere place. That's a bad place to be. So that to me is the distinction. Is looking at the score, is looking at the progress feeling good, then look at it. If it's not feeling good, definitely don't look at it, because all you're doing is holding yourself back. But more importantly, do whatever you have to do to get yourself into that place where you're allowing yourself to believe what you know is true. It will come eventually. It's just a question of when. It's just a question of how much. You talked about momentum. How much momentum going the opposite direction you have to overcome before you get there.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing I face, and I think I face that with a lot of my clients. Is that people would love to be doing what they feel most called to do and that feels most exciting, and to learn to finesse the money side of that. How will I keep my focus on what I love to do and let the money somehow flow from that? And I think for me, it takes overcoming a lifetime of believing that money comes through hard work. Money comes through paying a big price. Money comes through being really smart and clever and having everything figured out, and a really good plan and all that stuff. And rather than, maybe those things are going to fall into place, but how are they going to fall into place? Are they going to fall into place with ease and fun and joy and spontaneity and serendipity? Or are they going to fall into place because you put in a tremendous amount of hard work? And I think there's a place for work, but I think there's a huge place that unfortunately has not been practiced by us since we were little kids as much, is that how do we let abundance come to us? How do we let prosperity flow into our lives?
Yeah. And I think there's also another factor here too. It's what I call the Sudbury experience. And for those who don't know, probably most listeners don't know it, Sudbury is a model of education, very, very alternative model of education, in which the kids basically control every aspect of their education. They run the school, they decide what they're going to do all day. It's really, really radical in what it does. And interestingly enough, Abraham is an advocate of the Sudbury model. I didn't know this until very recently. Wendy found a video and pointed it out to me. But apparently they've known about it for some time, and they say, yes, that's that's the best model of education we've ever heard of for kids.
Wow.
Well, it is cool, yeah. Well, one of the things that Abraham's recognizing in that model is that kids, when they are in that model, they spend a lot of time trying things out. And when I say trying things out, I don't mean they take one thing and try it out for a year. I mean, they move quickly from one thing to the next. They try this for a day, and they try that for a day, maybe this for an hour, and this one for 2 hours. And they just keep moving along until they find something that jazzes them. And then they get sucked into it. And they just can't stop doing it. That, to me, is one of the most important skills most of us lack, because we were really never given the opportunity to do that. We were cut off from it by our social system, by our educational system. No, you're going to do what the teacher says to do. Oh, no, you're going to do what the administrator says to do. You're not going to follow your own guidance on this kind of thing. That's what we're all growing up with for the most part. But I think it's a good idea, even after we get out of school, to do this kind of thing regularly. And you know who one of the best people was at doing this? It was Jerry Hicks. Esther's husband, Jerry, had an amazing life when it came to trying things out. And we learn about this at the end of their book, Money and the Law of Attraction, right? We're talking about career here. We're talking about money. Well, this is at the end of the book. And let me just read this section to you, because this is, as with most of these books, Jerry and Abraham have a conversation. And this is Jerry's side of a conversation, but this is one of his longer little soliloquies, so to speak. But just listen to the things that he did. He says, through my early years, while we lived on a series of 40-acre farms in Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas, I did many different things to earn money, all of them very hard work and none of them fun, from picking berries to raising and selling chickens, to planting, harvesting, and selling tomatoes, to chopping and selling firewood. I earned quite a bit of money for those times, but I didn't enjoy my work at all. And then during my high school years in New Orleans, I worked at another series of non-fun jobs as a roofer, a sheet metal mechanic, and an elevator operator. The first job I had that was any fun at all was being a lifeguard at Pontchartrain Beach. I'm not sure if I pronounced that wrong. Sorry to all you Louisiana folks if I completely butchered that one. Yeah. I guess that I was like most others around me, he says, and it didn't occur to me that fun and earning money could coincide. During the time I was doing all of that not fun, very hard work, I was doing fun things after work. I got together with other kids in the park at night and played my guitar, and I sang at church and in the choir at the New Orleans Opera. I led a Cub Scout group, performed acrobatics, and volunteered as a teacher of gymnastics and dance. I did many wonderful, fun things, but I didn't earn money from any of them. However, once I became an adult, I never again worked very long at anything I didn't enjoy. Instead, I became self-employed, and those things I'd been doing free for fun, I just kept doing. But then I started receiving money in return for performing them. I hadn't been training for or planning for a career in music or singing or dancing or acrobatics. But then the Sheet Metal Workers Union called a strike. And while I was out of work, a man at the YMCA gym asked me to join El Gran Circo de Santos y Artigas in Cuba as an aerial bar performer in their circus. And so I didn't go in the secure direction in roofing and sheet metal that my father wanted me to plan for. It paid a steady wage, and I was trained for it, and was very good at it, even though I disliked so much about it. But as a result of the unwanted union strike, I turned easily in the direction of what then became a truly joyous life of adventure and earnings. I began as an acrobat with the Cuban circus, and then stayed in show business in one aspect or another for over 20 years. And what is it that he and Esther ended up doing? They were in show business. Esther still is in show business. I mean, we don't really think of it that way, but she goes around the country and around the world giving workshops. That's show business.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and she's got this great thing where she says there's these guys called Abraham that are in the unseen realm and that they talk through her. And, it's a great show. But
it's a fabulous show.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great example, isn't it? Like of how it could be if we followed all the different things that turn us on. I mean, some people land on one thing and then they just love that and they do that.
And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. But the point is he tried a lot of things and he didn't like most of them.
I think that's the way we learn. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's really the best kind of career that there is. I mean, it flies completely in the face of what I was taught when my father was working for the same company all his life. But I'm convinced that that's not the way to go. I saw what happened to my dad. I saw how it affected him. And no. That doesn't work. I mean, yes, he put food on the table. Yes, he provided well for us. But, oh, what a price he paid. Oh, my goodness, what a price he paid. Really, really high. Yeah.
I lived with a woman for 6 years who I watched, and she had an amazing ability to just do the next best feeling thing in her life in terms of heading towards a career.
Good for her.
And I supported her during those 6 years I was with her, so that she could do that. And she worked a little bit, but I really, I wanted her to succeed. And of course I put my own creativity on hold so that I could pay for her to become creative. And she did. And she created these 4 different products for astrologers to use when they're making charts and before the days of computers. And so we had those manufactured, and she wrote a book for astrology and all these things. And she taught me, though, that if you really want to find out what you love to do, just do a whole bunch of things, just like you're saying. And as you follow those threads, this feels good, this feels good, this feels good, before long, you will have learned, a bunch of different things. And those different things you've learned then will add more and more to the next thing you do.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
And maybe that's in a way what Jerry did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, it's really what you and I need to do more of. I think, like you said, you spent those 6 years supporting her so she could do it. You kind of put your dreams aside when it would have been better if you'd also include your dreams in it. And I did the same thing. I put my dreams aside so that Louise could quit her career as a psychotherapist way back when, in the early days of our relationship. And I was the one who was being the breadwinner and so forth. And looking back on it, I don't regret helping her to get where she needed to go. I just wish I'd spent more of my time getting where I needed to go.
Yeah, exactly the same feeling I have. Yeah. And then I did it in this relationship with the family for 15 years and helping them out. And I feel like I did it because I was not willing to pay the price to pay the price of doing my own work, because I felt there was such a big price to pay that I guess I was afraid to launch into this, what's the possibility that I might fail. I think we're not also taught as kids through our normal school system, and a lot of our parents, we're not given the example that it's okay to fail. It's okay to try something and it doesn't work out, and then you move on to the next thing that comes out of that failure, out of that.
Yeah,
and it's not really failure. Not really failure when you're a kid, though.
Quite the contrary. We're taught that it's a catastrophe.
Yeah.
We're taught that the food's going to stop coming onto the table. We're taught that everything's going to fall apart around us. Yeah. And we believe it. and
we're taught to lock ourselves into something that we don't necessarily
that we really don't like. Yeah.
Don't really like. I mean, that's the thing in college why I could never pick a major. I looked at the 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 different areas that I could major in, and none of them felt like what I wanted to do. I said, that's not me. That's not me. That's not me. And I tried for a while to imagine fitting myself into a box of being a psychologist or a sociologist or something that was along the lines of but I couldn't. It's just like, I don't want to go to all the, the master's training or the doctorate training to become that, so that I can finally hang up that shingle and say, now I'm this. I felt called in some unique way. And that's why I left college after 3 years and hit the road. And I started to learn about all kinds of other things like astrology and yoga and vegetarianism and on all kinds of things that were more along the lines of what I was called to do.
Well, good for you that you actually took the steps. I didn't even take the steps. I was so deeply entrenched in what I've been taught. Like, even when I was in college, I thought I had to go to the best college I could get into and set myself up for the best job I could get, regardless of whether I loved it, all that kind of thing. It never occurred to me, never for one moment, that I should go look at other kinds of schools that had different kinds of curricula and different kinds of degrees and different stuff to look at and study and so forth. And certainly not anything that was alternative. It had to be mainstream. Otherwise, you're wasting time and money. You can't do that. You can't waste time and money.
Yeah, we're almost like the generation that had to go through the last of that.
Yeah.
Putting yourself in a straitjacket is the only way you can really live. And
right.
You've got to, obviously our parents didn't entirely believe that, because many people in our parents' generation did do things that they felt really called to do.
Yeah,
but a lot of them were also conforming to particular professions that were out there. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you really feel called to do. I say that's fantastic. You really feel called to be a doctor, then you'll probably be a fantastic doctor. But if you're doing it because this is the best way to make money I can see, and even though I don't like it, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, it's a death knell right there. That alone is just going to strangle you at some point, sooner rather than later, most likely. But yeah, actually, it's a blessing if it happens sooner rather than later. I'm convinced of that, because for me, it took a long time. It took years before it finally strangled me pursuing something I didn't love doing. Not that I like being strangled, don't get me wrong, but if I'm going to be strangled, I'd rather have it happen earlier so I can shift gears earlier, right? That's the way I was feeling about it.
If people really want to look into this, there's a really good movie I just saw called Discover the Gift. and it's all about that. It's made by a Hollywood filmmaker who finally changed his perspective on his life. I guess he was making action films and things like that, and he began then to, I mean, in this film, he makes a film about discovering your unique gift, and he interviews, Mark Victor Hansen and all these different people that have done with their lives what they wanted to do, and they all talk about how you can do that. They're all personal growth, gurus or masters or teachers. It's really good. It's a really good movie to help you see. And I saw that when I was watching that, it made me think of what we were just talking about, how our parents' generation did not model and our teachers didn't model doing what you love as much as now we're modeling it, and we're trying it in our generation much more. And I notice my kids, they all do. They all have that as the centerpiece of their life, is doing what they love.
That's really good.
And they're trying to work around that in terms of money. Well, one of my boys does what he loves and makes a really good living at it, making jewelry, incredibly beautiful jewelry. But he makes incredible money doing that.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So it's good to watch young people more and more. I see them doing it. I mean, in droves, young people are doing what they love to do and finding a way to change the society so that there's more and more potential for each person to make money doing what they love. There's a huge proliferation of possibilities out in the marketplace to do what you love. If you get out into that marketplace and start experimenting, there's lots of avenues that income can come in and that you can still be doing what you love.
That's a good thing. It's good news. That's what I'm counting on too. And by the way, there are lots of people out there who don't know about this podcast and who don't know about the Daily Dose of Happy. So we'd like to encourage our existing listeners to take a moment and just post something on your favorite social media. Include the phrase loatoday.net. We've been asking for this for about a week and a half now, 2 weeks, something like that. And during that time, we're seeing a definite increase in traffic. We're like I mentioned earlier, we're actually on track to almost perhaps getting 10,000 plays in a month. I can remember, like a year ago when we were hoping to hit 10,000 plays for all time. So it's definitely been growing. But even so, there are thousands, millions of people who've never even heard of this podcast. And when you put it out there like that, it's not so much you're reaching out to your friends, although you are doing that too, but you're contributing to how social media passes messages along. And when social media gets more and more postings about things like loatoday.net, it gets shared with more and more people that you and I don't even know. So please just take a moment and go on to your favorite social media site so that other people can find out about the Daily Dose of Happy and get their daily dose, because you need to have positive programming in your life. There's so much negative programming. We got to counter it, right, Tom? And we got to find some way to turn that around.
Might as well. That's a good thing to be doing.
And more than that, we also want to encourage people who are not yet subscribers to become subscribers. I mean, maybe this is your first podcast, and if it is, just take a moment, go to our homepage at loatoday.net. You'll see instructions on how to subscribe to the podcast. It's pretty much like you subscribe to anything else. On your iPhone, you do it through the iTunes Store by searching on LOA Today. Same thing on the Android. You may need to, if you're on an Android, you may need to download some podcast software, but you do that from the Play Store, and then you open that software and do a search on LOA Today. Or you can just, if you already have the right software in place, especially with an iPhone, use your Safari web browser and go to the homepage and click on the link, and it'll just automatically subscribe you. Boom, you're done. But whatever way you do it, please become a subscriber and share. And Tom, how does somebody reach out if they're looking for a little more private consultation? Because sometimes some of these things are a little bit, delicate and difficult to talk about in a public scenario, but we need to talk about with somebody. How do they reach out to you?
Yeah, I offer a free half hour of coaching where we can talk about what your situation is that you might want to work on in a coaching environment, and you could feel out whether or not working with me might be good for you or not. And you can go to my website, which is called youarejoy.com, youarejoy.com, and you'll see there in the menu a chance to sign up for a free half hour of coaching with me.
All right, very good. Well, actually,
I would like to also recommend a book for this topic of today, Manifesting Your Unique Gifts. It's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And The Big Leap is about how you can take off the upper limit of your potential and begin to understand how to expand your reach into doing what you love to do in the world.
Excellent. Well, Tom, it's been great. I hope you have a great weekend, and let's pick this up again on Monday.
Okay, Walt, I hope you have a good one too.
Thank you, and we hope that you'll come back next time as well to join us here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.